Greetings! Today I'm going to cover the Black Legion, formerly known as the Sons of Horus, formerly known as the Luna Wolves. But first, my guest Occam the Untrue will talk briefly about the Black Legion and what they are, and then I'll get into the character details. Occam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hecatomb. The 16th Legion were originally known as the Luna Wolves, whose achievements were great and many. Their Primarch, Horus Lupercal, is stated in the records to have been the first of the Primarchs recovered by the Emperor. All the records say so. All the records lie. The Luna Wolves were the first Legion to start recruiting from worlds other than Terra. These initial non-Terran aspirants were drawn from Hive City gangs on the planet of Chthoniya, a former mining world that had long ago been stripped of most of its resources and devolved into a feral world. A feral world is a world which humans there possess pre-industrial levels of technology. This is where Horus Lupercal grew up. After the victory in the Olenor campaign, where about 100,000 Space Marines and 8 million Imperial Army troops were deployed against a massive Orc empire, the Emperor named Horus the War Master of the Imperium. Also, after this campaign, the Emperor suggested that Horus rename his legion to the Sons of Horus. While he initially declined to do so, he later renamed his legion to the Sons of Horus at the urging of Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels. In a complex scheme masterminded by Erebus of the 17th Legion, known as the Wordbearers, Horus was corrupted and turned to the worship of the dark gods of chaos. Horus, in turn, led his legion, as well as several others, to also worship the dark gods of chaos. Horus and his fellow corrupted Primarchs hatched a plan to lead a rebellion that would later become known as the Horus Heresy. Ultimately, the Emperor himself slew Horus. Not satisfied simply with killing Horus, the Emperor completely destroyed the soul of Horus so that he could not return as a demon prince. The Sons of Horus, along with most of the other traitor legions, were pushed back to the Eye of Terror, a massive anomaly known as a warp rift, where the warp overlaps with real space. Broken and defeated, the Sons of Horus took the body of their Primarch with them and licked their wounds in the Eye of Terror. Ezekiel Abaddon, who would later become known as Abaddon the Despoiler and War Master of Chaos, eventually took up the mantle of leadership, uniting like-minded legionnaires into what would eventually become known as the Black Legion. These legionnaires were not just from the Sons of Horus, but were also from other legions like the World Eaters, Word Bearers, Emperor's Children, and Thousand Sons. While initially small in number, Abaddon grew the Black Legion's numbers and began launching the Black Crusades, a series of campaigns, each one designed to achieve a small objective. These crusades eventually culminated with the end of the 13th Black Crusade, which created a great tear in reality, known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, which essentially divides the Imperium in half via raging warp storms. Abaddon believes himself to not be the puppet of any of the Chaos Gods, and chooses not to align himself with any one particular god.
Thank you. Now let's review each character, see what sorts of roles they might fill within the meta, and how much you should consider investing in them if you're looking to maximize your efficiency with resources. In this section, I'll also rank these characters in a few categories like survival, raid damage, and PvP damage. My ranking is out of the 68 characters in the game prior to the release of Vitruvius. I'll add his stats to my spreadsheet sometime later this week. And I'll include a link to the spreadsheet in the description below. My survival ranking is based off of health, armor, traits, and passive abilities. This doesn't fully capture all aspects of the game though. My raid and PvP damage rankings are calculated using base damage, number of hits, crit modifiers, pierce ratio, and the average armor of a legendary raid boss or average character armor for PvP, as well as the Beast Slayer trait, and whether or not the character is a Psyker for the purposes of boss Psyker damage reduction. First, all Black Legion characters have the Let the Galaxy Burn trait, which gives a 50% chance to score an additional hit against the target or a unit adjacent to the target, but only if the target or adjacent unit is not Chaos. This can be a bit of a double-edged sword if you run your Black Legion characters with characters from non-Chaos factions, and you could easily kill or maim friendly characters. The stats listed on the following infographics are the stats of the character maxed out at Diamond 2, and the numbers for their abilities are those abilities at level 50. This is to give you an idea as to what the character will look like when fully upgraded. First, we have Angrax, a Terminator champion that I rank at 11 out of 68 for survival, 55 for raid damage, and 54 for PvP damage. Angrax is required for the Fall of Cadia campaign. He's slow, but to compensate for that, he has the Deep Strike trait, allowing him to drop in and soak up hits for your team, especially those Overwatch sniper shots. His Terminator armor reduces the first hit he takes each turn by 75%. He's not good for raids, and he's not great for PvP. He is, however, amazing for Onslaught and Legendary Release events. Drop him in next to a spawn point, and watch him slay those dirty Xenos and Corpse Worshippers. The reason he's so great in these modes is because of his passive. Anytime a unit moves from a hex adjacent to Angrax, he takes an angry swipe at them with his lightning claws, like a big black cat agitated by his prey trying to get away from him. Well, that is, if big black cats also came equipped with huge metal claws that cut through armor like butter. Many in the community rate him as S tier. This is due to him being required for a campaign and how well he performs in both Onslaught and Legendary Release events. Next we have Volk, an unholy fusion of warpcraft and technology called an Obliterator. Incredibly squishy, my formula ranks Volk at 65 of 68 for survival, 32 for raid damage, and 15 for PvP damage. It's worth noting that if you pair him with Eldrion, his damage skyrockets because of his 6 attacks. Also, the formula doesn't account for his passive, which increases the average damage output of his normal attacks by about 40%. His application of the suppression debuff can be quite useful. In modes outside of guild raids, it reduces movement of debuffed units by 1 and reduces their damage output by 20%. For guild raids, the application of the suppression debuff doesn't actually debuff the boss, but if you're using the neurotrope, it will increase the neuroparasite level by 1. His active causes him to go into a frenzy, firing at everything in range with a maximum of 6 targets or, well, maybe 7 targets if he triggers the Let the Galaxy Burn trait. Not a terrible way to lay down suppressive fire, keeping your enemies' heads down. The community ranks him as A tier. Archimatos, a master of possession that I rank at 58 in survival, 32 for guild raid damage, and PvP is at 19th. He is required for the Fall of Cadia campaign. Definitely one of the better characters that you get access to early in the game. This character was definitely better in guild raids when the game was first released. However, as more guild raid bosses are released that do devastating AoE or outright kill summons, he's become less and less useful for raids. He's still great for raid bosses like the Hive Tyrant, or the Turvagon, but not so great against the Screamer Killer, Mortarion, or Ghazghkull. He summons a swarm of demons on the target with his active ability. Try to use this on targets with lots of empty hexes and lots of health in order to maximize the number of summons you get from this ability. Should he defeat an enemy with his ugly beat stick, that enemy will become possessed by a bloodletter and fight for Archimatos. This character is definitely worth investing in. He is rated as S tier by the community. And next we have Haarken Worldclaimer, a Chaos Raptor Lord. I rank him at 31 for survival, 6 for PvP damage, and 25 for guild raid damage. He is required for the Fall of Cadia campaign. His flying trait and high armor penetration give him some value in PvP, and thanks to his passive, the more kills he acquires, the more deadly he becomes. Also, his passive ability can help summon legendary release events and onslaught, allowing him to continue to stack up damage bonuses to his attacks. Having only 4 hits, he tends to be less than ideal in guild raids with the current meta. Also, he's too squishy to face tank some of the more deadly guild raid bosses. The community rates him as B tier, and I agree. Finally, we have Ezekiel Abaddon, the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, ranking in at 36 for survival, 38 for guild raid damage, and 25 for PvP damage. He's almost certainly one of the worst legendaries in the game. His active does decent single target damage, but sets his health to half. This has some potential as a weak half-assed heal, but if you use it at max health, or when you're at high health, then you're just gonna eat it and basically take a bunch of damage reducing your health to whatever it's set to. Despite being in Terminator armor, he has 3 movement instead of the usual 2 movement, like all the rest of the characters in Terminator armor, so that's not bad. Quick sidebar here. For a legendary, he's a bit of a letdown. Despite being in Terminator armor, he's squishier than Marneus Calgar, who is only in Gravis armor. He has less base armor before accounting for the Mark 10 Gravis armor trait that Calgar has. He also has less health. I guess if the first shot fired at him is a critical hit sniper round, Abaddon would shrug it off better than Calgar would. Yeah, whatever. So, I took a look at the 9th edition stats for these 2 characters. For those of you not familiar with the tabletop, this probably won't mean much to you, but Abaddon has 9 wounds to Calgar's 8 wounds. He has 6 toughness to Calgar's 5 toughness. They also both have mechanics to further reduce the damage they take. I don't think this really justifies how much tankier Calgar is than Abaddon though. But whatever, enough of that. His buff that he has for his passive is pretty lackluster. I feel like there should probably be some rebalancing done here. Buffs that apply to all characters, regardless of faction, I feel should generally be weaker than buffs that only apply to a certain faction. Currently, the majority of Abaddon's buff applies only to the Chaos faction, and the rest of that buff applies only to the Black Legion sub-faction. He's squishy for what I would consider to be a melee-focused character with the option of a less potent ranged attack. I think some rebalancing could be done here. I'm not saying to nerf Calgar. Definitely don't nerf Calgar, but Abaddon could use a little love. The community rates him as near the bottom of B tier, and I agree. Yes, that means, despite being a legendary, he's rated as the worst in the Black Legion. Still, there are certainly worse non-legendary characters in the game out there.
Hydra, Dominatus.